Imagine sitting in a crowded restaurant, the kind where every corner whispers of wealth and power, where a billionaire with a pen in his hand is seconds away from signing a deal worth millions, and suddenly, a quiet, almost invisible waitress leans in and whispers, "Stop, don't sign." What could possibly make a stranger risk everything, her job, her dignity, and her safety, just to interrupt a moment like that? Before I tell you the unbelievable truth, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Goodness Corner, because this story will shake you, inspire you, and remind you that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest weight. The story begins with Ethan Callahan, one of the wealthiest men in the country, sitting at the head of a polished mahogany table in his exclusive restaurant. The deal laid before him wasn't just business, it was history. It meant control of a corporation that fed millions, shaped economies, and influenced entire nations. Cameras weren't present, but the tension in the room made every breath feel heavy. Across from him, executives in sharp suits smiled with the confidence of men who thought they had already won. The pen in Ethan's hand hovered above the final page. All eyes were on him, except for one. Her name was Clara. She wasn't supposed to be near the table, but life has a strange way of weaving ordinary people into extraordinary moments. She was just a waitress, her apron slightly frayed at the edges, her hair tucked back after hours of serving plates no one bothered to thank her for. Yet, as she poured water into Ethan's glass, her eyes caught the faint trembling of his hand. Something in her heart told her to look closer. She wasn't sure if it was instinct, fear, or fate, but what she saw made her chest tighten. She leaned in, so close no one else could hear, and whispered, "Stop. Don't sign." Ethan froze, his pen an inch above the paper. Silence wrapped the table like a chain. The executives exchanged confused glances, one even let out a laugh, assuming she was insane. But Ethan turned his head slowly, his steel-gray eyes meeting Clara's trembling but determined gaze. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice low, but sharp enough to slice through the room. Clara's throat felt dry. She wasn't supposed to say anything, she wasn't supposed to care. But the words tumbled out. "Please, don't sign that paper. It's not what you think." The entire table erupted. "Security," one man barked. Another slammed his fist on the table, demanding she be removed. Yet Ethan raised a hand, silencing them all. He studied her, not as a waitress, not as an intruder, but as someone who dared to stop him in his most powerful moment. "You have 3 seconds to explain yourself," Ethan said. Clara's hands shook as she clutched her tray. Every logical part of her screamed to walk away, to apologize, to pretend she had lost her mind. But she thought of her father. He had been an employee for the same corporation Ethan was about to buy. He worked for them faithfully, years of sweat and loyalty, only to die after they cut corners on safety. She had documents, proof she had stumbled upon when clearing his belongings. Clara had never known this meeting would happen here, in front of her, today. But now that it had, she couldn't stay silent. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely steady, "the people across from you, they're liars. That company killed my father. They cover things up. If you sign, you'll be part of their corruption." Gasps echoed. Some executives scoffed, shaking their heads, muttering about nonsense and emotional outbursts. "She's lying," one sneered. A desperate girl looking for attention. But Clara's eyes didn't leave Ethan's. Tears threatened to fall, but her voice, though fragile, carried something rare, truth. Ethan leaned back, his pen lowering to the table. His face revealed nothing, yet inside his chest something stirred. For years, he had trusted instinct, not words. Deals, betrayals, wins, losses, he had seen them all. And yet, here was a stranger, risking her entire livelihood to stop him. Who would do that unless they believed it with every piece of their soul? "Sit," Ethan ordered. Shocked, Clara blinked. "What?" "Sit," he repeated, pulling out a chair beside him. The executives murmured in protest, but no one dared challenge him directly. Clara hesitated, then slowly sat, her hand clutching the tray like armor. Ethan turned to her. "You claim they're lying. Prove it." Her heart raced. She had documents, but they were at home. All she had now were her words, her memories, her father's final warnings. "I can," she whispered, "but not here, not right now. Please, just, don't sign until you see what I have." Ethan studied her like a puzzle, his jaw tightening. Then, in front of everyone, he set the pen down and pushed the papers aside. The room erupted in chaos. Executives raised their voices, slamming their hands on the table, demanding he ignore the delusional girl. One even threatened to pull out of the deal entirely. But Ethan lifted his hand, calm and commanding. "This meeting is over." Chairs scraped, curses flew, and suits stormed out of the room, their confidence shattered. Clara sat frozen, realizing what she had just done. She had interfered with one of the most powerful men in the world, ruined a deal worth billions, and put a target on her own back. When the last of them left, Ethan turned to her. His expression was unreadable, his voice steady but colder than ice. "You've just cost me a deal I've worked years for. If you're wrong, you'll wish you never spoke to me. But if you're right," his voice softened, just slightly, "you may have just saved me from a disaster I never saw coming." Clara's breath trembled as she whispered, "I am right." For the first time, Ethan's lips curved, not into a smile, but into the faintest hint of curiosity. He stood, adjusting his suit jacket. "Then prove it." He walked out of the room without another word, leaving Clara sitting alone in silence, her heart pounding, her life forever changed. She didn't know if she would ever see him again, or if this night would end her career before it truly began. But one thing was certain, this was only the beginning. Clara barely slept that night, torn between fear and hope, clutching the old folder of documents her father had hidden before his death. Inside were inspection reports, emails, and whistleblower notes, evidence that the corporation Ethan had almost signed with had been covering up workplace disasters, silencing families, and bribing officials. By morning, she wondered if Ethan would even remember her, or if she had been nothing more than a nuisance in his empire-sized world. But when she arrived for her shift, a black car was waiting outside the restaurant, sleek and intimidating. A driver stepped out, saying only, "Mr. Callahan is expecting you." Her heart pounded as she slid inside, clutching the folder like it was her only shield. The ride was silent, every passing streetlight reminding her of how impossible this all felt. Soon, she was standing in a glass-walled office on the top floor of a skyscraper, staring at Ethan, who looked no less commanding in the morning light. He gestured for her to sit, and for a long moment, he simply studied her as though he was weighing her soul against the billions at stake. "Show me," he said. Clara's hands shook as she opened the folder and laid the papers before him. Ethan read in silence, his eyes scanning line after line, his jaw tightening as the ugly truth revealed itself. When he finally set the papers down, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "Your father tried to fight this," he said, almost to himself, "and they buried him with lies." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but Ethan's expression hardened with resolve. "You stopped me at the edge of a cliff," he admitted. "If I had signed, I would have become part of their corruption, and worse, their crimes. Because of you, I still have a choice." Clara whispered, "I just wanted someone to listen." For the first time, Ethan's stern face softened, not with pity, but with respect. "And I did." The next week, headlines around the world carried Ethan Callahan's explosive decision to cancel the merger, accompanied by a vow to launch a full investigation into corporate corruption. The executives who had once smirked at him now faced legal battles, and families who had suffered in silence began to come forward, their stories finally heard. Clara, once just a quiet waitress, found herself standing beside Ethan at a press conference, not as an employee, but as a voice for truth. Reporters demanded to know who she was, and Ethan simply answered, "The reason I didn't make the worst mistake of my career." Clara's cheeks flushed, but deep down she felt something she hadn't in years: her father's fight had not been in vain. And as the cameras flashed, Ethan leaned down just enough for only her to hear, "The world will remember your courage. Sometimes it only takes one whisper to change everything." And if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Goodness Corner, because every voice matters, and the next story might just be yours.